Hi there, students. I'm Kathy Inman Behrens, and I'm looking forward to this opportunity to talk with you. Thank you very much for your thoughtful questions and for working through the document that Janice and I co-authored and the slides that I prepared for Portland State of Mind. My remarks tonight are going to be about how to create live dynamic interaction synchronously and asynchronously. I'll begin by noting, and this is in response to Lee's question about how to make a workshop dynamic, that you ultimately the goal is to have students able to learn from each other and how they solve problems, whether the problem is how to approach a critical text or how to build a website or how to master certain techniques in research. Learning from other students is the advantage of being at university. Otherwise, you could just take tutorials in any number of online learning venues, such as YouTube videos on your own or lynda.com. So dynamic learning is created from creating conditions where students are sufficiently prepared. They are instructed how to prepare something, and then they share their process. I'm responding right now to what Karina was saying about how 10 years ago as an undergraduate she took an online learning class and there were very few touch points or personalization points, and so she doesn't retain very much from that class. And so I want to spend a little bit of time thinking with you about skills development and then retention of those skills. So I find that students learn the most when they're convened to grapple with a large challenge collectively. For example, how do I create an HTML and CSS version of a poem? How do I host a poem in HTML and CSS? And then there's some collaborative sharing around that. And then students go off and self-pace their learning. Although it's more dramatically true when we're doing technical learning, like how to build websites, this is true even of how to interpret literature or just do the conceptual build of interpretation. So you want to create a context where people understand the articulated shared goal, and then they go off and work independently at their own pace, and then they reconvene and share that work with each other. It's that act of sharing the work and then talking about it dynamically, whether that's live in the physical classroom or on discussion board or through even things like this where people are doing screen grabs, like they're doing short videos and sharing them with each other. I've also had students post audio texts to each other. In any case, it's that act of reflection that cements the learning. And so that gets to both Lee's question about how to create a dynamic workshop and also Karina's observations about student curation and sharing of portfolios. Sharing of portfolios is my response to her. Hold on. So Karina was asking about customization, and I do think that students being able to share the paths that they took to arrive at a particular learning outcome is probably the thing that is the thing that multiplies other people's learning. And if they can feel personally invested in the means by which they learn those things, that's even better. And we do find that people respond well to seeing another human face talking to them and calling them by name. So those techniques are very valuable. I do want to talk for a moment about Nitya's observation about accessibility. You're right, I didn't create any alt text. I didn't create any accessibility tools on the slideshow that I gave you. It was not designed to be shared in a class. Those slides were basically mnemonics for me so that when I gave a live presentation, people in the room could understand the phenomena that I was talking about. I do have students build alt text into websites when they're making websites. And I've been thinking a lot about how to create a context where neurodiverse learners can learn at their own pace, even as I have students who are working very quickly through other kinds of materials. So I teach a class called Digital Skills, that's writing 566. And some students in that class have a lot of experience with code, and some have never looked at source code before. And if you add on top of that neurodiversity, then I need to create contexts where students can revisit learning materials over and over again at their own pace, and where I can create simpler versions of some of those high-level tutorials so that they're not overwhelmed. Because if you have to watch a video 2 or 3 times to be able to understand the things, then you would have to work 2 or 3 times harder than another student, and that's not fair or equitable. So I've really spent a lot of time this term creating audio lectures and other forms of ways to access the materials so that students can enter into that knowledge stream to the best of their ability. I still feel like I've got quite a lot of work to do on universal design. One of the reasons for that is that I don't teach online anymore predominantly, and so it hasn't really been top of my mind. If a student is not learning, my classes are small enough and my personality is such that I do really want to understand each student's learning journey, and so I am pretty attuned to how students are learning, and I invite them to talk with me about their learning process. So I haven't had to design for online-only learning for quite a long time, and the tools have really changed for that, and the expectation of universal design has changed around that. So I acknowledge I actually have some more work to do on that score. And let's see, Georg says, how to make it maximally interactive, and do I change the materials I'm teaching based on the venue, whether I'm teaching face-to-face or I'm teaching online? Because everything I do is related to media studies, pretty much I am teaching the same kinds of stuff, whether it's face-to-face or online, because everything I'm doing is metacritical about digital contexts of learning. Whether that's in book publishing, or I'm teaching about network culture, I'm teaching about book marketing or digital literature. I'm doing a kind of hybrid mix of media for students to apprehend the primary data, and then also the metacritical piece of how we learn about such data. So let's see. Katie is asking, what's my stance on amateur creativity, and do I think that people like Atticus and Ruby Kaur open the door for students or for people to discover poetry? And we have data about that. The answer is yeah, they do. They are bringing in new audiences. Poetry publishing had been pretty moribund, actually. There are publishers who would refuse to publish it because it just doesn't sell. But now, because of Instagram poetry, there are people who are coming in looking for their Rupi Kaur, and then after they've read Milk and Honey and The Sun and Her Flowers, they come to the bookseller and say, I really want more stuff. And then that's an opportunity for curation, for booksellers to kind of maybe expand the horizons of readers of poetry and kind of take them into work that meets their needs in other cases. So Rupi Kaur's feminism is very interesting to me. I actually attended her live show at the Schnitzer December 4th, and it was about 2/3 full and very vocal group of passionate fans. And I think what Kaur has done is she's created a context where people who had been shut out of poetry, she was herself shut out and told she wouldn't be able to publish a book, so she self-published, and she sold out of the first run of that, 5,000 copies in a week, I think. Andrews McMeel picked her up and has been distributing her ever since. So I do think that amateur creativity has many options for demotic authorship, like authorship by ordinary people, and And I think that amateur reviews are also incredibly important, whether that's on Goodreads or on Amazon. That the ways people express their opinions create more investment in those media objects. And not only does it cause them to circulate differently, but it also causes them to signify differently. So for me, when I think about Instagram poetry, and I'm writing a book about Instagram poetry for Cambridge University Press right now, like the book is called Instagram Poetry, Literature, Data, Money, and the data piece is really, really interesting. So would love to talk with you more about that, Katie. That's kind of my wheelhouse, that kind of stuff. And I shared with you guys the Portland State of Mind slides just because it was the most recent talk I'd given when Janice and I spoke. Since then, I've given like 2 more talks, and I did one about digital pedagogy, actually, so that would have been much more apt for your class, about digital creativity in the classroom. Let's see. I think I've answered the questions that you posed. It's just really a pleasure to speak with you in this context, and I'm available to answer any questions. I will be teaching a class in the spring called Technologies of Text, and that will be meeting on Tuesdays in the evening. So, I don't know. I'll see you around.